The year is 1916. The Great War, now in its third year, has descended into a brutal, grinding deadlock. The optimism of 1914 is a distant, almost laughable memory, replaced by the grim reality of trench warfare. This year would be defined by a single, terrifying word: attrition. The strategy was no longer about brilliant maneuvers or decisive victories, but about bleeding the enemy dry, throwing wave after wave of men into the meat grinder until one side simply couldn't take it anymore. Nowhere was this horrifying strategy more apparent than at the Battle of the Somme. On July 1st, 1916, British forces launched their big push. After a week-long artillery bombardment that was supposed to obliterate the German defenses, soldiers went over the top. They were met with a storm of machine gun fire. The first day of the Somme remains the bloodiest single day in the history of the British Army, with nearly 60,000 casualties. For months, the battle raged, gaining mere miles of muddy, shell-pocked wasteland at a staggering cost. By the time it ended in November, the Somme had claimed over 1 million casualties from all sides. It was a symbol of the war's sheer, senseless slaughter. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, things were just as chaotic. Romania, hoping to seize territory from Austria-Hungary, boldly joined the Entente powers. It was a disastrous decision. Ill-equipped and poorly led, the Romanian army was quickly crushed by a combined German, Austro-Hungarian, and Bulgarian force. By the end of the year, the Central Powers had overrun most of the country, seizing its valuable oil fields and grain supplies. It was a major blow to the Entente and a stark reminder of the Central Powers' military prowess. The immense strain of the war was also causing political earthquakes. In Austria-Hungary, the ancient Emperor Franz Joseph, who had reigned for nearly 68 years and was a symbol of the old European order, died. His passing marked the beginning of the end for the sprawling, multi-ethnic empire. In Britain, the failures of the Somme led to a political crisis. Prime Minister H. Asquith was ousted and replaced by the energetic and determined Welsh wizard David Lloyd George, who promised to wage a more effective total war. France saw similar turmoil, with its own leadership changing hands as the nation grappled with the devastating losses and political infighting. The old world was crumbling, both on the battlefield and in the halls of power. As the calendar flipped to 1917, the war was about to go truly global. Germany, desperate to break the stalemate and starve Britain into submission, made a fateful gamble. On February 1st, they announced the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare. This meant their U-boats would now sink any ship, military or civilian, allied or neutral, that approached Britain. The Germans knew this would likely provoke the United States, but they gambled that they could win the war before America could mobilize its immense industrial and military might. It was a high-stakes bet that would change everything. Adding fuel to the fire was one of the most famous diplomatic blunders in history: the Zimmermann telegram. German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann sent a secret coded message to Mexico. The proposal was audacious. If the United States entered the war, Mexico should attack them. In return, Germany promised to help Mexico reclaim lost territories like Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. But British intelligence intercepted and decoded the message, promptly handing it over to the Americans. The American public was outraged. The combination of sinking ships and a direct plot against U.S. territory was too much to bear. While America was inching closer to war, one of the original combatants was falling apart. In Russia, the war had been a catastrophe. The army suffered colossal losses, the economy collapsed, and people were starving. In March, protests and riots in the capital, Petrograd, spiraled into a full-blown revolution. The unthinkable happened. Tsar Nicholas II, the autocratic ruler of the vast Russian Empire, was forced to abdicate. A provisional government took over, but the chaos only deepened. The Russian army, racked by desertions and mutinies, began to disintegrate. Russia was effectively out of the war, a development that could have handed victory to Germany. But any advantage Germany gained from Russia's collapse was immediately erased. On April 6, 1917, spurred on by the U-boat attacks and the Zimmermann telegram, the United States of America declared war on Germany. President Woodrow Wilson declared that the world must be made safe for democracy. Although the American army was initially small, the nation's entry was a game changer. It brought vast financial resources, an industrial powerhouse, and a massive population that could be mobilized. The arrival of fresh, enthusiastic American doughboys would eventually tip the scales on the Western Front. The war at sea became a critical theater. In the first few months of 1917, German U-boats were devastatingly effective, sinking Allied shipping at an alarming rate. Britain was weeks away from running out of food. The situation was dire. The solution was the convoy system. Instead of sailing alone, merchant ships were grouped together and escorted by warships. It was an old idea initially resisted by the Admiralty, but its implementation was a resounding success. U-boat kills plummeted, and the vital supply line across the Atlantic was secured. It was a crucial, if unglamorous, victory for the Allies. On the Western Front, the bloodletting continued. The British and their Commonwealth allies achieved a stunning victory at Vimy Ridge in April. Using innovative tactics, like the creeping barrage, Canadian troops captured the heavily fortified German position in a matter of days. It was a masterful display of planning and courage, and a huge morale boost for the Allies. However, the skies told a different story. That same month became known as Bloody April for the Royal Flying Corps, which suffered horrific losses against superior German fighter planes. Like the Albatros D-3, flown by aces like the infamous Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen. Hoping to build on the momentum, the French launched a massive new offensive, championed by General Robert Nivelle. He promised a decisive war-winning breakthrough in just 48 hours. The Nivelle offensive was a catastrophic failure. French troops advancing against well-prepared German defenses were slaughtered. The colossal failure led to widespread mutinies throughout the French army. Tens of thousands of soldiers refused to fight, demanding an end to the pointless suicidal attacks. The French army was on the verge of total collapse, and the mutinies had to be brutally suppressed. Yet the carnage wasn't over. To take pressure off the shattered French army, the British launched another major offensive in Flanders, Belgium. The goal was to capture the ridges around the village of Passchendaele. The battle began in late July, and almost immediately, the heaviest rains in 30 years turned the battlefield into a nightmarish swamp of thick, clinging mud. Men, horses, and equipment drowned in the soupy morass. Shell craters filled with water, creating deadly pools where wounded soldiers would helplessly slip and disappear. The Third Battle of Ypres, better known as Passchendaele, became a byword for mud, misery, and futile slaughter. After 3 months of hellish fighting, the Allies finally captured the ruins of Passchendaele village, a victory that cost them over 250,000 casualties. The war's impact continued to spread across the globe. By 1917, nations from Siam to Brazil had declared war on Germany, turning the European conflict into a true world war. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire was crumbling under pressure from the Allies. British forces, after an initial setback, marched up the Tigris River and captured the prized city of Baghdad in March. This was a major strategic and psychological victory. Later that year, another event occurred that would have profound and lasting consequences for the region. The British government issued the Balfour Declaration. It was a public statement announcing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire. The declaration was a complex political move, aimed at gaining Jewish support for the Allied war effort, but it laid the groundwork for decades of future conflict in the Middle East. From the muddy hell of Passchendaele to the political revolutions in Russia and the corridors of power in Washington, 1916 and 1917 transformed the First World War. The years of attrition and global escalation set the stage for the final, desperate act of the conflict. The old world was gone forever, and a new, uncertain one was being forged in the crucible of war. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into history interesting, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join us for the next part of our series.